Welcome to the Journey Principles, where we show you how to go from stuck to unstoppable with life strategies that work. Now, here's your host and creator of the Transform You framework, Stephen Scoggins.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Journey Principles. We're coming to you live, well, not quite live, recorded live from Raleigh, North Carolina, and we're excited to have you guys join us. If this is your first time here, this entire podcast and everything we do is designed to help you go from stuck to unstoppable. I'm your host, Stephen Scoggins, and joining me today in the studio is Director of Connections, Connor Kraft, my big sidekick and homie, who's going to kick us off with today's featured topic and see if we can't get you well on your way to your journey. So what are we talking about today, homie?
Today we are talking about how to kill bad habits.
Oh gosh, have you ever had any bad habits?
Oh yeah, a lot of them.
Like what?
Biting my nails. I still do that.
You bite your nails?
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
So why do you think you do that?
Because I get bored. Honestly, like
that's interesting you say that.
I think because I get bored, so I get bored, and then like I notice that they're long,
Yeah.
but like I don't have clippers. I should probably just bring clippers around with me, and it wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
But I never do that. So the answer why is basically I'll get bored, or I'll just like be thinking, and I'll just do it, and then I won't.
So what do you think the leading causes of consistent bad habits is? Because you just mentioned one of them, which is kind of funny.
A trigger?
What causes the trigger?
I do not know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, no, I've actually heard a couple different things. I would articulate a little bit different, but supposedly bad habits come from two things: stress and boredom. So in the book Atomic Habits, the author talks about the difference that apparently when we're more stressed, when we don't have enough rest, or when we're kind of struggling in that methodology, we have a huge struggle in kind of focusing and keeping things done. And the other one is boredom, which is ironic that you even mentioned that. So
Yeah.
that's actually really funny.
Stress was actually the other thing that came into my mind was when you asked when I do that, I'm like,
Yeah.
either when I'm like really stressed about something or when I was bored. I just said bored because like that was the most recent time I could remember doing it, which was when I was bored. But
Well, one of the things that I think kind of illustrates, creates, and motivates bad habits is using yesterday to predict tomorrow's results. I think a lot of us kind of give up when we're trying to get rid of a bad habit or fix a bad habit or kick it in the face finally for good. We're far too focused on what happened previously than we are what's happening now and what we want to do with it.
so what do you think is like? I mean, obviously the cliche one is biting your nails that everyone says, but like what's an example of a bad habit that I think is a lot maybe more common?
So bad habits are in all 8 pillars that we've talked about. So financial, spiritual, emotional, professional,
Every area of your
like pretty
life,
much every
right.
single area you can have a bad habit in there. The one that I see most people deal with most often has to do with communication, actually communicating with one another. I see a lot of people who blow up for no reason or who retreat in for no reason, right? So their habit in dealing with conflict or dealing with people could either be to go way too aggressive or way too passive, right? So that would be a form of a bad habit, meaning so the person who's being super aggressive probably needs to learn to listen and learn to have some empathy and learn to have some humility, where the person who's learned that's historically a little bit more passive needs to learn how to actually speak up and actually speak their heart so it doesn't turn into a big volatile blowout. Because typically people that are very passive in nature, meaning they don't like to deal with conflict at all, will wait and wait and wait, and it'll build and build and build, and they'll come up like a volcano. And that's the unfortunate thing. So that's one type of bad habit. Biting your nails is another bad habit. Smoking, eating things you shouldn't be eating, doing things you should like.
So drug use,
a
anything
bad habit
could
can
be
be
a bad
anything.
habit. So a bad habit, I guess, because habits could be good as well. So a bad habit is any behavior, I guess, that is repeated frequently over and over and over again to the point where you've done it so much that it's essentially muscle memory.
Yeah.
And it's going to require a lot more effort to, I guess, overcome that habit.
Yeah, I think for me, I actually historically, when I think habit, I think negative. I don't know why. I just think when I think I have a habit of, and almost every time you say I have a habit of, it's almost a negative thing.
Interesting.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I like to think that there's a difference between habits and routines. And I'm going to jump into that here in a couple minutes. But I think habits typically are more reactive in nature, where routines are more thought out. And one of the ways I like to kind of knock this out of the park is, we've talked about this before, but if you have a bad habit and it's not based on principles, then it's going to surface itself and happen all over again. If you can learn to move from habits to a routine that's based on principles that we'll get into, and probably this podcast a little bit in the next one, we will be able to identify what they are, replace them pretty quickly, and kind of move forward.
I see. I actually like that way of looking at it because when I'm thinking about it, routine is something that a routine sounds more deliberate to me.
Yeah.
Like a routine is something that you set out. Like I'm gonna wake up every morning. I'm gonna go hit the gym. I'm gonna drink my gallon of water. I'm gonna do whatever. You can set up a routine for yourself.
Yeah.
And if you follow a routine for what do they say? 66 days.
66 days on average. It can be as
habitual.
early as 18 to 125 days. But yeah, 66.
So you're basically saying that your method for basically breaking bad habits and building good habits is to not look at them as habits necessarily, but to build better routines that allows you to get there.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and then I think another thing is if we probably should talk about the different roadblocks that actually come up with habits. Why it's so difficult for people to kind of break free or break through a habit.
It's actually, I'm pretty sure it's one of the most searched things in terms of the personal development space.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about like, hey, look at your habits. If you want to look at your better results, look at your habits because your habits are what have gotten you here. And I've heard it so many times. I'm pretty sure I've read that Atomic Habits book. Like I've read a lot of books about habits.
It's a great book.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of things about habits, but there still seems to be just so many questions about them. Why do you think that is?
I think one of the reasons it's kind of like everything else we talk about. It's a blind spot for so many of us. Most of us won't take the time to search out where the habit originated from, or where it came from, or kind of how it influences our life. That's why I thought it may be a good idea to break down some of the things that come along with habits that kind of are the roadblocks or the stumbling blocks to kind of make that happen. And the first one is relying only on willpower. Far too many people are spending all their time saying, well, if I just do it this way, I'll wake up tomorrow feeling like I'll wake up tomorrow and do it.
Oh, okay. So that's like when you have something that you need to do, maybe you don't necessarily want to do it. And you say, I don't really feel like it right now because I feel like crap or whatever. I feel like watching TV and eating Cheetos.
Look, I'm going to be honest
with you.
You
say, I'm going to do it tomorrow because tomorrow I'll feel better.
Yeah.
But then you never
I've been telling myself for 2 weeks I wanted to get back on keto and start doing keto again because I like keto. It made me feel good.
That's a good example.
Right? Yeah. And for the last 2 weeks around lunchtime, I'm like, all right, I'll do the cheeseburger with no bun. It'll just be the cheese and stuff like that. But then I find myself at 2 o'clock over there in the candy dish that Lisa has over in accounting.
Oh, no.
Grabbing 1 or 2 Snicker bars.
I see.
Right? So that kind of defeats the entire purpose. So
yeah, that'll knock you right out of ketosis for sure.
In a heartbeat, right? So when you think about it, one of the things that I've been doing recently is I've been trying to really discern, which is where this topic even came up, is like, okay, I know better. Like, I'm teaching this stuff. Like, I should definitely know better. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I still struggle with things that I want to change kind of right away, which is where I thought it might be good to understand where the roadblocks are. Because as I was digging into it, I was like, okay, here are the roadblocks. Maybe if I can look at the roadblocks, I can come up with a plan to get over them.
So there's a common set of roadblocks or things, stumbling blocks that hold people back.
Yeah, so relying on willpower. Yeah, relying on willpower is one. Focusing on not focusing on delayed gratification. So focusing on instant gratification is another. I don't know if I needed a sugar hit, which is why I was in the candy dish, but I didn't want to wait.
So if your mindset is basically like, how do I feel right now? If you're focused on feeling, that would make sense as something that would be a potential trap that will lead you into a more habitual based life. Because if you're always operating in how you feel, you don't have much control over that.
You have zero control because it's emotional responses are not logical thought.
Well, I mean, outside of like if you take care of your diet, you take care of as Keith, as our friend.
Somebody's our friend.
Yes. KC. I don't know why I said Keith because I was thinking K, then I was Krejci, but it was like KC. Yeah. Keith. His name's not Keith, is it?
It's KC.
KC. Okay. KC Krejci. I only knew him as KC, so I don't know his first name. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
What's his actual first name?
I don't know. It's KC. I've always called him KC.
You don't even know it either.
I've always called him KC.
Well, KC Krejci says, founder of Living Fuel, he says you need to be properly nutrified.
Yeah.
And so basically I'm just saying if your diet's whack, then you might feel like crap because of that. But
that actually should be a quote. If your diet's whack, then you probably feel like crap. That should be an actual quote. Well done, Connor. Nice job. You heard it here first on the Journey Principles. No, totally. And then I think another roadblock that we run into is having vague intentions. So people not being clear on what it is they want to do. So you mentioned biting your nails earlier. Right. How serious are you? How really intentional are you about really wanting to even churn that into something different?
I don't know. It's not even.
It's probably not top of list, huh?
It's not. Mainly because it hasn't been something that's really hindered me. Like, it's not like, oh, you're biting your nails every 2 weeks. So what do you think?
What is a habit that has hindered you?
Habit of overthinking.
Okay.
Habit of procrastination.
Okay.
Habit of let's see. I've had habits of, knowing that I need to get something done. I mean, this kind of falls into the procrastination bucket, but like, I'll tell myself, oh, I'm just going to go think about it and plan it out so that it'll be more efficient.
Yeah.
And I'm able to trick myself every time into thinking that, oh, if I just go take a break and walk around the building and think about what I need to do, it'll be somehow easier when I get back to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I fall for that every time. I think it's really because I just like to walk around, maybe. I don't know what it really is. I'm still figuring that out.
I think you just have a ton of energy.
Yeah, but anyway, so like I'll sit down at my desk and I'll be like trying to work on something and I'll just feel like, so I'll just get up and try to pace around to kind of think about what I need to do and get more clarity, because I guess I feel like I'm lacking clarity for some reason.
Yeah. So you would say having vague intentions. Is that not lack of clarity?
Is that what you think it is?
Well, what I'm saying is when we're trying to look at this entire thing, if you're not clear on the direction you want to go, you're highly less likely to actually take action in the first place.
I've definitely found that to be the case.
Right. So, and that's what I mean by having vague intentions. So if you want to get somewhere consistently and make progress on a regular basis, you almost have to make the decision before you take the action, not the other way around. Right. So habits, by definition, historically, are reactive rather than active. Active, that's why I like the word principle so much, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Another one is underestimating your surrounding influences. So the environment. A young man recently just came back home, and he's been working through some different things. And he was, first thing he told me is like, I finally realized that the people I was hanging out with were probably not the people I should be hanging out with. I'm like, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad you realized that. And I think that's true for each one of us. For example, we had a situation not too terribly long ago inside of one of the businesses where they had a culture aspect in which things that, like, we don't stand for this. But yet I had 2 or 3 team members that were getting together, and they were talking and doing things that are counterproductive to the culture that we say we're going to have. So what do you have to do? You have to correct it, right? So, and a lot of that was just reactive. It wasn't really thought through. No one meant any harm. No one meant any kind of deception or nothing like that. It just so happens it had a negative effect.
How often do you find that people who tend to repeat the same negative behaviors over and over again, how often do you get and sit with them and they actually realize that it's a habit? And how often do they not even recognize that it's something that they keep repeating over and over again?
Gosh, that's a great question. I would say the large majority of them don't realize that action is coming out of habitual thought.
I felt like intuitively like that was the answer.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's kind of an interesting thing, because I was picturing you sitting down with 2 team members.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, the way that usually goes, both of them think they're right.
Yeah.
Neither of them really realize what they're doing wrong.
And neither one of them are listening.
Yeah. And so I realized that just epiphany came on. I was like, neither of them really seem like they would know that they're having a problem with the bad habit. Yeah. So I don't know what the antidote is to that, but
we're gonna come up with some ideas here in just a minute. I want to finish up this list real fast, but so reacting versus planning. So obviously, if you're reacting, you're not actually thinking it through. Procrastinating instead of taking action. In other words, one step is better than no steps. Right, so most people think that they have to do it all at once, and they have to, that's where resolutions come from, right? So resolutions come from, I'm going to change this one whole area of life all at one time.
This is it. I'm getting in shape this year. Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, 3 months in, they haven't got that consistency down pat yet, and they fall off.
Because they didn't put in a routine.
Exactly.
So now they're at the whim of their habits.
That's right.
Makes sense.
The other thing that I kind of mentioned just even now is trying to do everything all at once. So a lot of things that we deal with here are people that are historically feeling really 3 things. They feel stuck, they feel overwhelmed, or they feel frustrated.
Very accurate.
And almost in every case, they're trying to do way too much at one time, or they don't know which thing to start with to begin with.
Yes.
Okay, so each one of those.
And because of that, as someone who is very recently there and still deals with that, because I know that mentality, because of those 2 things, you're more likely to actually stay stuck in the future, because you're going to be more apt to living by habits. Because if you don't know what to do next, you don't have a plan, you're naturally just going to fall back into whatever's your norm.
Yeah,
and so if your norm is bad habits, you're just going to keep getting what you've always got, unless you actually make some kind of system or procedure in place.
That's right.
In order to fix that.
That's right.
I've found that to be true recently.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that kind of touches on the point. We have to avoid focusing on resolutions when we actually should be focusing on the routine. So most of us are so focused on the resolution. We're so focused on the outcome. We're so focused on getting there further, faster, and if
On
we're not
losing the 60 pounds or whatever.
yeah, we're just way too focused on incremental gain, or we're not focused enough on incremental gains, right? Routines give us incremental gains, right? Most people try to remove a habit rather than replace it. Right?
I have heard that. Yeah.
Right. So the quickest way to get past a bad habit is to create a routine to remove and replace.
I actually really, that's a new take for me. And I've listened to a lot of habit podcasts and shows.
Yeah. Oops.
I don't know if I've heard a lot of people talking about using routine specifically to replace habits. A lot of people I've heard take your bad habit, replace it with a better habit.
Yeah.
But then I go, okay, cool, but it takes 66 days to make a new habit. So I've got 66 days there of struggle and pain.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've never been able to make it through that usually. Those 66 days, usually I end up going back to what I did before just because it's so uncomfortable. But you're saying kind of something different, which is create a game plan.
Yeah, so go back to a couple several shows ago. I can't remember if it was on our YouTube channel or if it was here. You had made mention of how you had recently had this catapulting launch of progress, and you're finally being twice as productive as you had been, and you were frustrated at first because you kept coming to me, and I'm like, "Well, do the push-ups, like keep up with the routine, keep up with the routine." Routines build muscle memory. Right, so that's how a habit is replaced.
Right, and even if you look it up, how do I build a habit? It says just do the same thing every day for 66 days.
That's right.
The hard part is people can't get themselves to do that thing every day for 66 days.
And that's where aligning yourself with a good quality partner can actually come into place. You know, so my 2 cents is, like I said, I've always looked at the word habit as being a negative connotation. Doesn't mean it has to be, but I see habits as negative. I see routines as positive. Because if you look back at my entire series, my entire history, so obviously our longest podcast on record is when we shared a small portion of my story.
It was the last podcast.
Yeah, it was the last podcast. But if you go back and look at my entire life, from the time I made it from homelessness to off the bridge to starting a company to building a business, all that kind of stuff, the one thing that you see is it's actually one thing but with 2 phases. I had a principle that I was building from, and then I had a routine to back it up.
So those are the 2 components, if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly. If you want to kill any bad habit, you have to create a routine, right?
Actually, my perspective is this, and we'll dig into this a lot more on the next episode, but you have to define the principle that's going to govern the thought and actions that are within that routine.
So the principle comes first, then you build a routine, and then you take action, and then after you do that for 66 days,
it becomes
or
muscle
whatever,
memory, and then you're like, holy crap, it actually worked. And essentially that's as easy as it can get. But if you try to tackle all 15 or 12 of your bad habits all at one time, you're going to fail.
Why?
Because you can only do so much at one time. In order to replace a habit, even with a principle and a routine, you have to focus on it.
And it's very uncomfortable.
And it's very uncomfortable, which is why it requires a focus. So if you have too many pieces of it, number 1, it's uncomfortable. Number 2, it's just too much. And so your brain is trying to look for clarity, and you're confusing the crap out of yourself.
Yeah, like if you've ever tried to, let's say, build a habit of going to the gym when you've, for the last several years, not been very physically active. I've done that. I've had multiple instances where I'm like, okay, I'm going to start going to the gym and taking it seriously. Still, obviously, if you're looking at me, I haven't yet, so I'm working on it. But I will get
baby
there.
guns.
Yeah, I'm focusing on one pillar at a time. So right now I'm building the career stuff, but I might get into some physical.
Well, you're gonna
need
need some basic cardiovascular stuff. Otherwise, you're focused on the career. Well,
I'm probably gonna start going to the gym soon, but obviously I've been saying that for a while.
So think about this: bad habits are like weeds.
Right.
If you don't get them out of the garden, they take over.
Okay.
All right. So what we want to do is we want to identify. Maybe take the time after this podcast is over. Take the time to identify 5 or 10 habits that you want to find and replace.
That's a really good action step for this one, because then the next podcast that we release 2 days from now, we're gonna go deeper on. I believe I'm assuming we're gonna dive deep into these steps.
I'm gonna give you my thought process on principle-based living. Right? Nothing has changed my life more than using principles to actually build my life. And we'll go into more of that in a little more detail a little bit later on.
So next podcast is like the blueprint for how to actually overcome this.
That's right.
On this podcast, start thinking about some of the habits you want to overcome.
That's right. Get a pen and paper. Write down 5 or 10 habits you want to overcome. The next thing you're going to do, so we call that step 1 is called identify. So you want to identify what that habit is. I know that sounds cheesy. I know it sounds too easy. But you'd be surprised at how many people actually don't take the time to identify it on paper on purpose. Most people are like, well, I need to quit doing this. Well, I need to quit doing that. Or I need to start doing this. Or I need to stop doing that. Right? That's where they get stuck at. And they just stay there.
Well, it's like I talked about with the overwhelm episode where I said I had all these goals in my head, and I had always heard, hey, write down your goals. That helps.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't need to write down my goals. And then eventually, after years of not getting the results I wanted, I finally got fed up and was like, okay, I'll try it. Even though, and I was like, it's not going to work. And I was sitting there writing down my goals, but then literally immediately after I'd written them down, I looked at the piece of paper and I was like, I actually feel a lot more clear now.
Yeah.
And I actually started quickly over time seeing improved results. And I was like, that's really weird. I had literally put that off for so long. And it really was as simple as getting it out of my head. So
I'm not going to say I told you so.
Nah, you should.
No, but seriously, the mindset you should have with this entire thing, okay, when it comes to habits, is the process of identifying, removing, and replacing, right? Now, I'm going to share with you guys in the next episode how to do that with principles, because I think principles are more powerful. I think principles are more predictable, and I think principles will also predict more progress. That's a lot of P's in a couple sentences. Okay. But that's the way in which I like to do it. But in the meantime, think about the first 5 or 10 habits that you want to change, okay? We're going to take step 1, which is identify. Step 2 is replace, okay? Step 3 is remove the word should and replace the word with must.
Ooh.
I should go to the gym. I must go to the gym. I should balance my checking book, right?
I've heard Tony Robbins say, we don't get our shoulds in life, we only get our musts.
I have never heard that, but that sounds brilliant to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't live by shoulds. I shoulda, woulda, coulda. And that thing's been around probably since the time of Jesus.
I paraphrased that, by the way, so I don't know if that's exactly but it's basically something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, but seriously, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that. When you commit deep enough, everything else is possible.
You told me something once that was very impactful to me. One of the most impactful things you told me in your early mentorship of me. Yeah. This was years ago. We were sitting in your car, and I said, hey, Steven, I'm good at deciding what to do. I just am not good at doing it.
I remember this.
And you said, no, you're not good at deciding what to do. I was like, what? Because I thought that because in my head, I had had the thought of I need to do this or I want to do this, that was deciding. But you said, no. When you decide to do something, you cut off all other possibilities.
No distractions.
There is no other option besides the fulfillment of that thing you've decided to do. And I was like, I just sat there in your car. I was like, whoa.
Go back to my we talked about origin stories in a few episodes ago, and we talked about my personal story, right?
Right.
What was the difference between me building a business and not building a business? It was the commitment.
Yeah, you did it.
Like I had if you look at it, if you look at the story, in all honesty, technically it was everything was stacked against me.
Yeah.
But because my shoulds were removed and my musts were put in place, I literally let nothing stop me, which is the definition of unstoppable. Right?
You refused to give up.
I refused to give up. I refused to give in. I refused to not keep going. And over time, that routine took root. And then all of a sudden, the other steps became a whole lot easier to take. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's why I said that you got to replace the shoulds with must. The next step is you have to ritualize and or create a routine that keeps you on track, right? So if you document, hey, I need to lose 10 pounds, whatever you want to call it. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, I need to document. I need to nutrify myself, as KC would say. Okay. Yeah. I need to get cardiovascular.
You need to be exercising.
I got to be exercising 20 minutes a day, whatever, right? I need to make sure I get enough rest, because you'd be surprised at how many people struggle with their weight, not because they're not exercising, not eating right, but because they don't go to bed on time. Your body.
That's always been hard for me, by the way. So, like, I envied you so much in the last podcast when you said you get up at 5 a.m. and it's just natural for you.
I try to go to bed at 9:30 or 10.
So I am more circadian rhythm-wise, which I'm not huge on.
All right, you got to explain what circadian rhythm is to most people, because even I'm like, what?
It's just like your body's natural sleep cycle.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of science out there that says, oh, this is just the way that you are with your sleep cycle, and some people are night owls, some people are morning people. Mm-hmm. But I've always hated that, just to hear it.
Yeah.
Even though I get that there's science, right? Because I'm like, well, I want to be a morning person. I want that. But it's very hard for me to train myself to do that, because everyone always just says, oh, no, the solution is just go to bed earlier. And I'm like, okay, great, Sherlock, but how do I shut off my brain when I want to go to sleep? Because at 10 p.m., my brain is like on.
It's the same thing we're talking about right now, right? You start practicing going to bed earlier and earlier on a regular basis, going to bed at the same time every time. Your body will eventually take that as the new sleep cycle.
So I'm not being patient enough.
I'm so glad you said that, because number 4 is offer yourself grace, and number 5 is be patient. Right?
Yeah.
Most people, again, want instant gratification. They want instant transformation, instant success. And the reality is, if it's going to be lasting success, it will not be instant success. I probably should write that down. That's a good one.
That was good. Thankfully, we have it on camera.
Yeah. All right. So we have to get that one on there, right? Lasting success is not instant success, right? If it's gonna be present, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, it doesn't matter. It's gonna be because of consistency, doing the right thing at the right time on a regular basis.
Got it.
Okay. And which is why I like the principle part so much. So, again, step 1. Everybody take time after this podcast, grab a pen and a paper, write down 5 to 10 habits you want to change, like you want to remove, okay? Consider what you're going to replace them with. We're going that deeper on the next episode, how I look at doing that. Remove the word should, replace it with must. Actually write it down. Instead of I should go to the gym, literally say I must go to the gym. You know what I'm saying? Like, actually take the time to grab a pen and a paper and jot it down. The reason you want to jot it down is because your brain will actually use it as a sticking point, because you're using more than one modality in order to actually recognize what has to happen. All right, so make sure you do that. Third is going to be ritualize or routine. Create a routine. You mentioned going to bed earlier. Go to bed. And if you stay there and stare at the darkness for an hour, then you stare at the darkness for an hour. Right? Your brain will actually say, ooh, lights off, I'll shut down. Right? When lights are on, think about it. As soon as somebody turns on a light, we all wake up. It's because there's a place in our brain that says, oh, it's daylight, get up. You see what I'm saying? Same kind of deal. If you're looking at computer screens and iPhones and video games, your brain is going to stay turned on. Okay? Offer yourself grace and be patient. Right? So when it comes down to how you kill your bad habits, it's actually not as hard as people make it out to be. But if you want to kill them and kill them for good, the best thing you can do is use the identify, remove, and replace, right? My father went from smoking cigarettes to chewing gum. He went from drinking alcohol to drinking Diet Pepsi, right? I'd love to see him take those a little bit further to where those are not needed, but I will settle for those, right? Because the other 2 things were killing him. These 2 other things are occupying him. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I hope that helps. I don't know if it does, but I hope it does. If you need more information on habits and principles and things of that nature, come back next week for the next podcast.
Actually, in 2 days. 2 days.
I'm sorry. It's not next week. It's 2 days.
Episode 10. So right now
10.
we're on episode 9. So air on a Tuesday, and then
Can you tell, like, our stuff is ritualized?
Yeah.
Routine lives.
Well, I mean, that's the only way at this point
to keep me on track.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if we want to provide the most value possible for you guys. So
all right. So with that being said, again, questions, if you want your questions answered on air on YouTube, questions@journeyprinciples.com. If you want free resources and free ways to kickstart your butt and get yourself from stuck to unstoppable, journeyprinciples.com/resources. And until then, we'll see you on the next Journey Principles. Take care, guys.
See you guys.
I'll see you in the next video. And please, if you don't mind and you enjoyed the life mastery content we're building, consider hitting the subscribe button and also hitting the bell so you'll be the first to get notified anytime we release new content.